Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback, senior NFL reporter. We had Kevin Stefanski fired an hour ago. Why was he fired?
I think it's just a water under the bridge type thing. Dan, they've been through a lot together over the last 6 years, and this goes back, of course, to the Deshaun Watson trade. They've done a lot of good things there. They made the playoffs in 20. They made the playoffs in 23. And they had a really good roster. He and Andrew Berry that they inherited. Some of those guys that they inherited are still there. Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, like top shelf guys, and I just think like the inability to really to take the next step was part of it, right? And how that all tied to a single move. I mean, you think about the damage done by the Deshaun Watson trade, right? It kicks out your ability to draft because you lose 3 first-round picks. It kills your salary cap, and then it keeps you from doing anything else, at least for a short period of time, to fix the quarterback position. And so I think there's an acknowledgement in the building that everybody had their hands tied behind their backs because of the trade, and everybody's got blood on their hands because of it. I just think because of all that history that they had been through, and that Kevin had been through with the players, it seems to me like Jimmy just made this decision. It's just tough to move forward with the status quo. And so I will say this, it's going to be tough to find a better one than Kevin Stefanski. And I think everybody's going to find out over the next 2 or 3 days how much the rest of the league thinks of Stefanski with the amount of interest he's going to get from other teams.
Is there a chance Deshaun Watson's the starting quarterback for the Browns next year?
I mean, I don't think it's impossible. It's impossible to know for sure until we know who the coach is, right?
But if he's healthy and under contract.
I mean, that's the thing. We already know that they're going to pay Deshaun Watson $46 million for next year, right? Like, if they cut him, somebody would sign him for the minimum. And so it would be like $45 million, So you're already sinking that into it. You've already sunk 3 first-round picks into him. I think the worst thing for the Browns at this point would be feeling like, all right, we're going to move on, and then having him go have great success somewhere else. So I could certainly see the logic in saying we're paying him anyway. We might as well bring him back. Here's the one caveat to that. The one caveat to that for me would be if you are going to go all in on a young quarterback, right? And if there's somebody, and I can't remember where their pick is. Do you have it in front of you, Dan? I think they're 4 or 5, somewhere in there, right? They're not 5. The Giants are 5, but they're somewhere in there.
6.
6. Okay. So let's say they decide we're going to go all in on Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore, and somehow they get in position to draft one of them. Then I could see where it's like, okay, it's just not worth it having that around. You know what I mean? Like having kind of the ghost of quarterbacks past here in the building, and you want to go with a clean slate for your young quarterback. But if the plan is to go and bring in, Kirk Cousins to compete with Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel next year, if it's something like that, then I'm not sure I see the harm in taking one more swing at it with Deshaun Watson just to make sure that you got that wrong, even as every indication is that you have gotten it wrong. And my understanding is just in the near term, he's actually been pretty good, in the building and through his rehab over the course of this season. So that would be the logic in taking a swing at it, and that you've already sunk so much into it. You're already paying him for next year. So why not give it a run? Again, to me, the one caveat there would be if you've got a young quarterback that you want to go all in on, you might want to take him out of the equation just to give the new guy a clean environment.
Better opening, Atlanta or Cleveland?
It depends on what you think of Michael Penix. You know what I mean? You would think that whoever's coming in there is going to have at least a year and maybe 2 years with Penix. They both have pretty solid young cores. I think, you look at Atlanta, a good veteran offensive line, one of the best players in all football at any position in Bijan Robinson. I don't know if Kyle Pitts will be there, but it looks like he turned a corner. You've got some young pieces on defense that you might like, and the young pass rushers, Walker and Pierce that you drafted in the first round last year, but you don't have a first round pick. And I think I probably maybe lean Cleveland because you get to do your thing at quarterback, right? So you get to make your decision at quarterback. You've got that great young draft class, and all those guys are going to be on rookie contracts for the next few years. And Mason Graham and Carson Schlesinger and Harold Fannin and the two running backs, Judkins and Sampson. And you have two first round picks, you know? I mean, so you've got the ability to kind of build there with the core you have, a couple of older pieces in Ward and Garrett. I might lean Cleveland, but it's close. That's not a bare cupboard in either place.
Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback, he's senior NFL reporter. What should Vegas do?
Well, I think, I'd be surprised if Pete Carroll made it the day. I think Vegas needs to figure out how they're going to be set up going forward. I think Tom Brady's got to learn how to run a football team. And it sounds weird coming from me. You know what I mean? It's the greatest player of all time. So I don't want to sound I don't want to sound like an idiot saying that, but I do think that there's parts of it that, people who work there saw as blind spots.
There's a difference between running
There's
an
a huge
offense.
difference.
Yes.
I mean, John Elway, I could just tell you this. John Elway, when he got back to Denver in 2011, he eventually became kind of difficult to work for, but at the beginning, there was a very real acknowledgement on John's part of what he didn't know, and he really rolled his sleeves up and learned how to scout and how to evaluate. And that, that isn't as simple as I played in the league for a couple of decades, so I have an idea of what I'm looking at. Of course you do, but it's not the same thing as building a team and managing a football operation, So, as going forward, what's his role in all of that? Is he committed to learning to run the show? Because a lot of people there refer to him as the boss, whether, he's there day to day or not, and he's not there day to day. A lot of people there look at him as the boss of the football operation. So there's that piece of it. How does Alex Guerrero fit into that? There's a bunch of people in that building who report to Alex Guerrero. How does John Spytek, the general manager, I expect he'll be back. What's his role in picking the coach, and then how does the coach fit into the mosaic of all of that? I think a huge part of the issue this year was they kind of pieced everything together, right? So it was all right, let's put together an all-star staff. We love Pat Graham as the DC. He's going to work with Pete Carroll, who, by the way, has run a completely different defensive system. And now, let's go get Chip Kelly out of Ohio State for $6 million per year, and let's show our might. And we can go and get these sorts of guys now. It's a new day for the Raiders. Well, how did all those pieces fit together? I think that's the biggest piece of this is so now with Tom Brady, ostensibly the guy who is in charge, what does that look like going forward? And how do all those pieces fit together? To me, that's the biggest piece of what I think will be a coaching search coming up here in the next few days and weeks is how does the coach fit into what you've built otherwise? Are you reconfiguring any of what you've already got there? There are big picture questions that the Raiders need to answer, and obviously a very, very big decision coming in April when it comes to what to do with the first overall pick.
Tom Brady, a better broadcaster or owner?
Broadcaster now, I'd say. Okay. I mean, and we'll see what as ownership. I mean, I would say there are so many people that have been so intelligent that have been humbled moving into ownership roles. I always get that question, how can this guy who built this empire in business not know what he's doing in football? I'm sure you have too, right?
Yeah.
I get that question. It's not the same thing.
It's like the Mets owner. He just thinks I can buy. I buy everything.
Right.
In the NFL, you can't buy everything.
Right. And a lot of them get humbled. I mean, every one of them comes in and we're going to be the Microsoft in football. You know what I mean? And we're going to reinvent everything. And that's why you see so many of these owners stock up on analytics when they first, get in the role. It's all of these idiots are hiring gym teachers and we're going to do it a different way. Well, there's an art to how this whole thing works and how you put the whole thing together. And it's not as easy as just saying, I'm going to throw money at the problem and I'm going to apply the lessons I learned in my other businesses. It's a unique business, So I do think Tom's got I think he's got he's got a lot to learn when it comes to being in that role atop, an organization. And Mark Davis has empowered him to be a big voice in that organization. He's got to find his voice. I actually think he's gotten really good at broadcasting too, Dan. Like I was skeptical at first. Like I thought, as great as he is, like he I think at the beginning was like a little, and I'm not, I guess if I don't know if you want the media conversation here, but he could be a little stiff that first year, and I think he's really kind of found his way with that. Like I think he's gotten really, really good at calling games.
I don't even notice it anymore. Like
Yeah.
if like I don't really care who's doing a game. I used to. Where it was Madden doing it. It just feels like there's this plethora of football that there are just a lot of voices that are there.
Yeah.
Now
Well,
there's some that do it better than others, but I'm not watching. I couldn't tell you what game Tom did this weekend.
yeah. I mean, look, that's the thing for me too, is like I'll get a better like idea of the whole thing when we get to the playoffs. I'm following so much. I mean, I honestly like I have a better idea of how, Herb Street and Collinsworth and Aikman call a game just because they're standalone games. Like
Yes.
I'm paying attention to too much, like in those 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock windows on a Sunday. So it's hard for me to really dive in. But what I have seen of Brady, it does seem like he's gotten really good. And I remember hearing this a couple of years ago that he was studying Johnny Miller, um, and trying to learn how to be critical. And I thought that was really interesting, So I do think he's taking the job seriously.
Yeah. And, I talked to somebody who's friends with him, and he even said, "Hey, would you talk to Tom?" I said, "Tom doesn't need my input." And then he said, "Well, what would you tell him?" I would say, "Don't try to be too structural. Like,
Yeah.
like this is fun. Have fun.
Yeah.
Pick your spots. Say what you need to say. Give us insight. Tell us things that we don't know. We don't. A lot of times, I found out that these guys who played don't know that we don't know something, and they'll be like,
Right.
"Oh, this. Oh, you know what? Watch that." I would never think that, and I think the more that Tom doesn't try to sound like an analyst, the better that he'll be. Like, Collinsworth and Herb Street, Aikman, Tony, they kind of go, "You know what? I'm just going to be myself." And that's really hard to do. They tell people in this business, just be yourself.
Yeah.
I've been working for 40 years trying to figure out who I am. So I can't expect Tom to be himself. He may not know who he is as a person in the spotlight.
I'm with you because I remember when I started doing TV, 20 years ago, I remember somebody telling me you want to be almost like one and a half of yourself. And so then there's a tendency to get out there and be Mr. Announcer guy with everything and try to enunciate everything correctly and all of that different stuff. And, I sort of like, I tell younger people now who ask me, I'm like, there'll be a point when you feel like Mr. Announcer guy. And then there'll be a point when you're talking into a camera and you start to feel like yourself. And I feel like that's when you're starting to get it, right? Like when you're doing both, when it's like, yeah, I'm not talking like I'd normally be talking to my friends, but I do sound like myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 So,
And my job, part of my job is to make you forget that you're on TV or on radio.
which you're pretty good at.
So we just have a conversation like that.
Yeah.
That's the goal each time. All right. Before I let you go, other possible openings.
Yeah, so I think the Dolphins want to move forward with Mike McDaniel. I know they're meeting and recapping the season here today. I don't anticipate anything today, but in the next couple of days, I think they'll make that decision, and they're going to have a little bit of a different structure. Brandon Shore has been elevated there. He's reporting directly to ownership. That's their cap guy. So they're going to have like sort of a three-headed monster where they're going to hire the new GM who will be a scouting type.
And they'll move on from Tua in Miami?
I think that's likely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's likely. I do think McDaniel's fate could be tied in at least in some way to maybe what's available out there. Does Stefanski's now available? Does John Harbaugh become available? So that's something. And I'm just kind of like looking through some of my notes here.
Does John Harbaugh become available?
I think that's a little bit of a coin flip right now. I think you have those discussions. I wouldn't move on from him if I were the Ravens, but I would say this. I had people there tell me that they believe this is the best roster they'd ever had going into the season.
Mm.
That level of expectation with the team. You've got a looming contract negotiation with Lamar Jackson. There's just a lot to sort through and digging out from underneath the season there. And, I think that provokes those big picture questions. So I wouldn't say I'm 100% one way or the other on the Ravens. The Cardinals, I'd expect they're going to hang on to their general manager, Monty Austin, for it. They really like Jonathan Gannon, their head coach. Obviously, they end the season the way they've ended, which I don't think they've won a game since September or October.
I know.
But, I think.
And they move on from Kyler Murray as well.
I think with Gannon, the thing is like, I think it may come down to, and Gannon's a really loyal guy. I wonder if they ask him to make changes on his coaching staff and that leads to something. We've seen that before. So, does he go down with the ship? I think that's a fair question. Kyler Murray's future is certainly tied to all of that, as well. And
how about real quick before I have to go? More likely to move on from their team, Harbaugh in Baltimore or Tomlin in Pittsburgh?
Right now, because the Steelers are in, I would say Harbaugh in Baltimore.
But if they lose that game at home,
it's weird.
If they make that kick last night, if they make
it strange.
I know.
Here's the thing about the Steelers, though, Dan. The Steelers have T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Rodgers. All these guys are older players, right? And so a pretty substantial reset is coming. That's when that conversation happens, right? Like, does Mike Tomlin want to go through a 2 or a 3 or a 4 year rebuild, right? Do the Steelers see him as the voice they want in there leading that rebuild? If you're Tomlin, do you look at it and say, do I want to do that? Or do I want to take a year in TV and then maybe go to a situation in 27 that's a little bit more ready-made? Because their season's still going on, I don't think they fully confronted those questions. I think both are, those are two more where I think, Baltimore and Pittsburgh are both a little bit up in the air, but that's what you get when guys have been in those positions for as long as John and Mike have been.
Thank you, bud. I appreciate it,
Thanks,
Albert.
Dan.
That's Albert Breer, Monday morning quarterback.